Hello, welcome to Rough Cut Film Review. This is a review of The Wolf of Wall Street. So this is Martin Scorsese's latest picture, and it's theoretically him going back to what he's best at. It stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Jonah Hill, Matthew McConaughey, and also Joanna Lumley crops up as well. So it's a funny old bag of different genres, really. It starts off a rags to riches story that's somewhere between The Pursuit of Happiness and Goodfellas. Sort of. It's not really like either of those things, really, but you know what I mean. It's based on a book by the American motivational speaker, and it's based on his life, Jordan Belfort. DiCaprio plays Belfort, and starting out as a young man, the film begins. He's a young and ambitious chap. He's full of piss and vinegar, although I've never really understood that expression. He's married to a hairdresser, so he's from relatively lowly roots. Apparently his parents were both accountants, so not so bad. He starts off at a Wall Street brokerage, and he's taken under the wing of the rather sleazy boss there, Matthew McConaughey, who teaches him an ideology that sort of expunges self-interest over the interests of the investors. So it's basically this idea that actually the broker gets rich at the expense of the client. It's not the client gets most rich and the broker takes a little cut. It's the idea that basically no one really knows what they're doing, except if you're confident you can make money out of it. So this leads DiCaprio's character into a roller coaster ride of excess, of sex, of drugs, of all that stuff. His performance is up to his normal high standard, and at times he gets really, really good, and Scorsese does get really good performances out of his cast, and he absolutely should be lauded for that. In terms of the script and plot, I think this is probably Scorsese at his best and as his most sort of lurid, and the areas at which the film works, it's really good. So it's the scenes of the exciting drug taking and the razzmatazz and the prostitutes, and the banter between the male characters is all really well done. He's not quite so good with the female characters, and it's sort of a bit misogynistic, but I'll get on to that. It's a really well shot film. It's well made, it's well constructed. Like many films these days, it's far too long for its own good, and for me it feels like at least two films that have been stitched together around about the halfway mark. The first half is a story of greed and ambition and corruption of the soul, really, and the second half is sort of an FBI crime caper where he's turned into this sort of pseudo crime figure, which I never really bought. I feel much kinder to the first half of the film. The second half, frankly, I'm very unenthusiastic about, and it seemed to do its best to confuse me with what the point of it all was. In all fairness, it really does lose its way, but again, I'll get onto that a bit later. We deal with drug addiction, but rather than it being the sad and inevitable downside to the extremes of a life lived, it's largely played in a comical way. So we have these drugs, I think they're called Quaaludes, which don't exist anymore. They prevent DiCaprio from talking, and he's slurring his speech, and clearly they had a good time making that on set, but really completely left me cold. Just doesn't work. By the end, I really was wondering, how have we gone from this naive young man who's obviously ambitious to where we are now? It just seems like it's such a long film, and there seems to be so many odd decisions made throughout. So the film is problematic for me, or the films as I think of it. Firstly, DiCaprio's character, and this is central. It sounds like a minor point, but it's not. His character, Jordan Belfort, he doesn't start off a nice person. He's not a nice person who is corrupted by all this excessive stuff. He's not corrupted by money, by women, by power. He is a jerk at the beginning, and he's a jerk at the end, but he's a lot more successful and rich, and therefore he can pull off bigger and more silly stunts. The other issue really is that it paints a rather depressing picture of human nature. There are very, very few redeeming qualities on display here, and Scorsese really doesn't think very much of them. So it's all played very much, everyone is lazy, everyone is stupid, everyone is arrogant, everyone is obsessed with money and consumerism. And as the viewer, as the film went on, I got completely desensitized by the fabulous wealth on display and the excess, and there seemed to be very little consequence to any of this. The film is misogynistic, but it's sort of saved by Joanna Lumley popping up every now and again and being really lovely. But again, that's slightly confused, and there's one particular key scene which I won't spoil, but it really made me wonder what on earth was going on there. It didn't quite make sense. I enjoyed the first hour. I really went along with the film, but the lack of likability of the main character and the fact that I wasn't absolutely rooting for him. He's a man who's richer than the Pope, doing whatever he wants when he wants. He also happens to be a jerk, and the fact he's a rich jerk is a real clincher. So he's not getting corrupted by money. He's an amoral prat at the beginning of the film, and he's an amoral prat at the end. And also the sort of chase scenes toward the end of the film and the way the plot goes makes no sense. You don't care about this guy. The situations are absurd, and it's basically he brings it all on himself. So no, I don't have much sympathy. ultimately, I really wonder what this film is trying to be and what does it actually achieve. And I think the answer to those questions is not very much at all. There's an attempt to give the film some heart too late in the picture, but it's very much an afterthought. Ultimately, this is an autobiographical piece made about and by someone who's still alive, and this causes problems in terms of narrative structure, but also in terms of our unreliable narrator. I thought exactly the same thing when I saw Goodfellas, another Scorsese picture which everyone loves. I thought that with Henry Hill. How much of what he's telling us is absolutely true, because obviously there are legal repercussions to him and his ego as well. And very much with this film, I suspect that his ego gets in the way of an awful lot of the truth, and it prevents him from being a relatable character and I presume a relatable person. So it's a life unreliably told. So all it is for me is a list of events. You know, when you speak to a kid and you sort of say, "Oh, what did you do at your weekend?" Not that I talk to a lot of children, but you get the idea, and they say, "Oh, and you know, I went to the park and then I rode a pony and then," and that's what this film is. It's just a list of events with all this razzmatazz. There's nothing behind it. There's nothing anchoring it. There's no sort of morality or emotion there. So having said that, it's not a bad film at all. There's real skill both in front of and behind the camera, but it's just a real shame that it wasn't all pulled together in some sort of coherent manner. And I'm sorry, but Jordan Belfort is a complete and utter jerk who learns nothing and doesn't care to learn anything. Kind regards, Christopher Thomas.